Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler's controversial plan to reduce the city's homelessness crisis to a simmer includes the creation of 6 large encampment sites. They would each house 150 people to start, and Portland officials are hoping the sites will be open by 2024. I'm Elena Neale-Sacks, and this is Beat Check with the Oregonian. Today, I'm talking to homelessness reporter Nicole Hayden. Last month, Nicole took a trip down to Los Angeles to see how things were going at a large tent camp there, one that's run by a nonprofit that may end up operating one or more of Portland's forthcoming tent sites. Nicole, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, first question is just, why did you, as a reporter for the Oregonian, decide to travel all the way down to LA to report on a tent site? And how long were you down there?
Yeah, so, oftentimes when, the city or the county is launching into a new project, they're really looking for a local nonprofit to run it. This time, though, no local nonprofits expressed interest in this plan, partially because they don't support it, and partially because it's just not something they could take on. It's a lot of work. And so the city has been working, planning with this nonprofit, Urban Alchemy, that's based in California, even though they haven't awarded the contract to them yet. Urban Alchemy really led the city to plan out this tent site project the way they have. And so we wanted to really understand who this nonprofit was. We wanted to see what the operations were on the ground and let people know what could be coming to Portland. And so I spent 2 days in LA talking to folks living at one of the tent sites down there, workers that staff it, and then neighbors that live around the site.
Gotcha. And so what did you see when you were there at the site?
Yeah, I think I was pleasantly surprised when I went to the site to see that, it was really clean, it was quiet, it felt safe, and the campers living there really expressed gratitude for, the chance to have this calm, stable place to stay temporarily. They, get a large tent. It's enclosed in a fence. No one can come in or out unless they camp there. They get food throughout the day, 3 meals, but people can eat at any time. They get supportive workers. It's very clean. When I was there, folks were cleaning the bathrooms, and it's even smelled good. So, people really expressed gratitude that they didn't have to worry about the violence. They could sleep through the night. A lot of folks who are living on the street don't sleep through the night because it's too dangerous to do so.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of the specific people at the camp, obviously there's way more unhoused people in LA than could fit in that one site or any of the others. Are there, I guess, what are the kind of criteria? I don't know if that's really the right word, but kind of for people to stay there.
Yeah, anyone can stay there. It's really a come as you are kind of place. And while I was there, there's actually, 5 available tents. And so I think, I'm not too sure how they recruit people, but it sounded like word of mouth. In Portland, though, for our Safe Rest villages, you have to be referred to them. So our sites might be similar to that, but those details haven't really been shared yet. But yeah, the folks who could stay here, you don't have to be sober. They ask that you don't do drugs on site, but you're not going to get kicked out if you do, because people know that if you really put strict criteria on who can access safe places, then that's really doing a disservice. So, anyone can come and stay at these places.
Yeah. And so when you were there, I'm guessing you probably talked to some of the, neighbors living maybe on that street or in the neighborhood, or, people who own businesses nearby. What did they kind of have to say about their experience living, in close proximity, living or working in close proximity to this camp?
Yeah, they expressed gratitude that the camp was, pretty quiet day to day. Since the camp was set up, they noticed fewer tents on their sidewalks.
Mm.
Part of that is because Urban Alchemy, the nonprofit, is tasked with keeping the surrounding area kind of clear of people that are loitering. So that really translates into them being responsible for sweeping people and discouraging folks from camping. Or if they do see folks who are homeless in the area, kind of going out, offering them services, saying like, hey, we have a spot here. Are you interested in staying here?
Gotcha.
So most neighbors had positive things to say. There was just one business owner who said he experienced some frustrating moments of folks coming in and maybe not paying for things. But it's definitely hard to say if those were folks living in the campsite or if those were just other people.
Yeah. So I guess taking a bit of a step back, could you just talk a bit about kind of what/who Urban Alchemy is, like as a nonprofit?
Yeah, so they are a California-based nonprofit focused on addressing homelessness, providing services, and that they employ folks who were previously incarcerated to kind of staff their various projects. While they're based in California, they've been expanding. They've expanded to Texas so far. They hope to expand to Portland, and I think they have some other sites they're looking at as well. But essentially, they started out providing public bathrooms to folks who are homeless. They kind of ran a project like that up in the California's Bay Area, and since then they've kind of taken on other bigger projects, such as these tent sites, and they've expanded very, very quickly. They've gotten many, many government contracts throughout California, but they've also come up against criticisms. They've had multiple lawsuits against them. For example, there was a city-run tent site in the city of Sausalito, which is in California's Bay Area, because a worker employed by Urban Alchemy was bringing meth onto the site and giving it to the campers living there. And also, a woman at the encampment said one of the Urban Alchemy workers sexually assaulted her. And that led to a federal judge saying that the city of Sausalito could not renew their contract with Urban Alchemy. So that's a big deal. And then there are other lawsuits involved employees of Urban Alchemy saying that they felt like they weren't compensated fairly or that they didn't provide the proper training, especially like de-escalation training, teaching staff how to deal with folks in mental health distress. And, some of those cases were just dismissed, some are settled. But they are a very, very big nonprofit looking to expand quickly. And with that comes some issues like that.
Yeah. I'm assuming you probably asked them or, someone from Urban Alchemy about these lawsuits. What did they have to say?
They didn't really say much. When I asked how they would prevent similar issues from happening in Portland if they were to receive the contract to operate up here, they essentially said that they strive to provide a safe place for everyone.
Right, okay. Kind of classic PRE response.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, I guess kind of for the moment, maybe shelving that aspect of things a little bit, if Urban Alchemy were to win the bid to run, one or more of the large tent sites in Portland, is the expectation that they would run them in, a pretty similar way as they are currently running the LA site?
Yes, so it would be very similar, pretty much identical. So people would be living in large tents. They would get food throughout the day. There would be staff on site at all times. They could be connected to other services they need. They could work on their housing goals. But one critique is that, these are tents. And while in LA it's warmer, maybe that doesn't really translate to the best shelter here. And so that's why at least one local nonprofit said like they didn't apply to run this site because they felt it was not the best model. So when I asked Urban Alchemy how they plan to address the weather issue, they responded that, folks have already been surviving in tents in Portland thus far, that they felt like people, would be okay. And they said that, they could put more tarps over their tent, or maybe they could get a heater, but not like an actual heater, maybe like a heat fan that blows towards multiple tents. But we do know that tents here really don't stand up to the rain, and they're constantly having to be replaced. People's clothes and items are always soaked with water, so that is something that would need to be addressed.
Yeah, definitely. So Mayor Wheeler's kind of latest plan to address homelessness has been met with kind of criticism from multiple angles. I mean, including, what you just kind of mentioned. But another one of the points he's been under fire for, which you mentioned in your article, was, comment that unsheltered people who don't agree to one of the city's large encampments, once open, could face citations or even arrest unless they agree to mental health or addiction treatment. And recently, his office has kind of walked that back and said citations and a camping ban are still kind of under discussion. But based on your reporting, what are opponents of these potential provisions kind of saying?
Yeah, we know that it's not best practice to criminalize homelessness. You're just adding to the barriers for someone to get out of that situation by placing citations on them or arresting them. You're just pushing them a few steps backwards versus a few steps forward. And it also breaks trust. Like, if you're being threatened with arrest to go into this site, like, people are going to kind of come at it with like this kind of fear and anxiety. So while these sites we saw in LA make people feel very safe, if you kind of proceed that with threats of arrest, you might take away those feelings of safety and trust. And, working through addiction is a very difficult personal thing, and you have to really choose and want it, and being forced into it on the guise of like, you have to do it or you'll be arrested. I mean, someone might go through a treatment, but it doesn't mean it will last if they're forced. Like, it could though, it could also work, but it's a very personal thing, and it's a very like hard medical thing, and the situation needs to be right. And also, already people who want mental health care and they want substance use care or detox, like, they're having a hard time getting into it because we don't have enough beds or services. So it's just a challenging plan overall, and it goes against what higher courts have already fought for. Is they've tried to through a case called Martin v. Boise, say it's not humane to criminalize homelessness. And
Right.
So that it kind of feels like we're going a couple steps backwards.
Have you heard any concerns either from housed or unhoused Portland residents, or, both, about the prospect of Urban Alchemy running the coming encampments?
Yeah, I feel like as I've been talking to mostly nonprofits that are local here, they really don't know much about Urban Alchemy. So they're not sure if they would be good or not. Instead, nonprofits have been offering their expertise of like what it's like to run a nonprofit here locally. And so I think that could lead to good partnerships if those with local expertise offer their knowledge to an incoming nonprofit. But as far as overall, I think the broader populace is just desperate for any solution. So
Yeah. So what's the timeline for getting these sites up and running in Portland? Because so far the city is quite a bit behind schedule in its plans to get some smaller sites going. So yeah, is it kind of similar for these larger sites?
Yeah, they said the first of these sites could be operating as soon as 2024, but they haven't released a timeline yet. So we don't know how soon this first one that Urban Alchemy has bid for could pop up. I can tell you that the site in LA that I toured, that was built in 6 months in LA,
Mm-hmm.
to add some perspective. But yeah, overall, in terms of the other safe rest sites, which are offer people tiny homes to live in Portland, and those sites are quite behind schedule
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. I'm wondering, do you, just from your perspective, being down in LA, seeing the camp there, and, having a very deep knowledge of the situation here in Portland, like, are you concerned at all about the scale difference? Not necessarily in terms of the number of people experiencing homelessness in the two cities, but, the camp down in LA houses, remind me how many people were living there again?
They have 95 tents.
Right.
Yep.
And then the ones here, at least according to the city, are, initially they had said 500
Mm-hmm.
per site, and now they, kind of bumped that down to 150 at least to start. But is there, I don't know, is that something that's on your radar at all, or do you think that's not a huge
Yeah, I
barrier?
think initially that was a big question, is could Urban Alchemy scale this up to what Portland was hoping for? But since they're doing it little by little, since they're just bidding to run this one small site first and then grow from there, I think the scaling up piece is doable because
Mm,
while the LA site had 95 tents, I think our site would have 100 or something tents, but could house up to 150 people
mm,
for like when you consider couples living in tents together.
right.
And when I was at the LA site, it actually felt much smaller than that. Even though they had
Mm,
that many tents, it didn't feel like I was walking into like this mass encampment. It still
yeah.
felt pretty small and kind of cozy.
Oh, interesting. I'm wondering, how does Sam Adams' departure from the mayor's office fit into this picture, if at all?
Yeah, I think the initial conversation about having these mass encampments came out more than a year ago, a year
Mm-hmm.
before the mayor's office officially announced that they would be pursuing this project. And it came out through like leaked documents from Sam Adams that
Mm-hmm.
he authored. But the plans are now already fully in motion. And I think his departure won't really impact that. I think, yeah, things are going to move forward just as planned.
Mm.
Yeah, his departure, as we know, is the mayor said, linked to him bullying and harassing female employees. So hopefully, no employees will be bullied or harassed anymore. But I think as
Yeah.
far as this homeless plan, it's still going to march forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so once these, six large encampments are open and operating in Portland, what's the city's plan for kind of moving those residents into more permanent housing? And obviously, that's a much larger question,
Mhm.
but if you could touch on it.
Yeah, so for anything that the city or county does, the end goal is housing. And, these tent sites are kind of the answer of like, how do we keep people safe in the meantime?
Hmm.
Um, but if we're not using these sites as an opportunity to help people get into housing, then we're not really using them as best we could. So
Hmm.
the plan is to kind of the county and city and all the agencies to work together to get folks living at these sites connected to housings to so that this can be a stepping stone in their longer, housing process. But what we did see at the LA site is that in the past year, only 2% of the campers moved into housing, and
Yeah.
many, many actually returned to homelessness.
Hmm.
So that could be a concern. Um, but we do know that our safe rest villages in Portland that offer folks tiny homes to live in,
Hmm.
we've seen housing success from those sites. So as long as those kind of skills and methods are applied to these tent sites, they could work to get people housed. As long as
Yeah.
everything is, melded together and working together, and definitely that can be a challenge, but it can also
Right.
it can be accomplished.
Yeah. Well, lastly, I just kind of want to get a broader sense based on your reporting for this story, but also just your other reporting recently of how things are feeling for folks living out on Portland streets right now.
Yeah, thankfully this week feels sunnier. So hopefully things are looking up. But there has been some really harsh days in the winter, the past couple months, and that really breaks people's spirits.
Yeah.
And when they hear talk about these, encampments and the fact that they could be arrested or cited if they don't move into these sites, since it hasn't been decided if that will or not happen, it kind of leaves people feeling fearful and anxious. And,
Yeah.
as the city continues to increase the number of sweeps they do, they're just not able to settle. And I've seen that anecdotally, like, maybe I see fewer tents around my neighborhood, but that means I'm seeing more people just sleeping in their sleeping bag, less
Yeah.
protected than before. So I feel like people are feeling anxiety right now.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to touch on that I didn't really ask about or that you hope readers take away from your story?
Yeah, just that we need to be open to all kinds of solutions. One thing is not going to work for everyone, but we also, while we're open to all these solutions, still have to have a critical eye to make sure we're providing the safest programs we can for people. But yeah, thank you for having me on and for chatting.
Oh yeah, thanks so much for your reporting and for coming on the show to talk about it. Well, thank you for listening to Beat Check with the Oregonian. If you haven't read Nicole's story yet, you really should. And I made it super easy. Just click the link in the episode notes. As always, if you like the show, feel free to head on over to Apple Podcasts or just stay put if you're already there and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.